Several times Adam Silver has hinted at potential NBA expansion in the near future, and I think there's been a lot of discussion recently on what that expansion could look like. Typically, I am not the biggest fan of Adam Silver, but one thing I think he's done a fantastic job of is increasing the globalization of the NBA and the amount of fans we see across many countries throughout the world. And I think that very soon we could see 2 more NBA cities added to the mix in the NBA, which I'm really excited about, and that's exactly the point of this video. There was a lot of work that went into this, so if you do enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Let's not waste any time. We're going to jump into an NBA city map where we actually take a look at what cities and what regions of the United States specifically, and Canada of course, that aren't really prevalent when it comes to the NBA. Of course, the Eastern Seaboard, a ton of teams, and that makes sense because of how densely populated those cities are there on the East Coast. But the further west we go, you see there's less teams per square mile, except for California, which has a ton of different teams in that state. But you think about some of the vacant spots in the west, of course you see that whole clumping of the Dakotas, Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and I think pretty clearly you can understand why there's not NBA cities there. In terms of the density of population, it would be difficult to fully sustain that as an NBA city when it comes to putting fans in the seats and actually turning a profit on those cities, because the NBA is a business. But I do think there are some missed opportunities currently in the Western Conference, specifically when you look in the Northwest. Portland, of course, dominates Oregon, but Washington, we all know Seattle. There's been a lot of rumors about the return of the Seattle SuperSonics. We'll see if that team makes a return in this video or not. And then you also look down kind of between Nevada, Arizona, and Utah. Of course, the Jazz fairly north in Utah, and the Suns fairly south in Arizona. Kind of leaves a pretty big opening right where Las Vegas is in Nevada. And those are the 2 cities that we are going to see expansion into, I think, in the near future. The Seattle region and the Las Vegas region are the 2 most likely cities to add NBA franchises within the next few years. So that's exactly what we're going to do in this video. I'm really excited for that. And since we're adding 2 Western Conference teams, that would change the Western Conference to a 17-team conference, whereas the East only has 15. So because of that, in a league realignment, we'd actually move the Memphis Grizzlies over to the Eastern Conference so that each conference would have 16 teams, making it a 32-team league overall. And I have a huge thank you for the designs you're going to see in this video for the teams. Jacob Schuler, a fantastic young kid. He's really talented, has a lot of design talents. I'm a big fan of his work that he does. Instagram link to his Instagram is going to be in the description. I definitely recommend going and giving him a follow on there. Huge shout out to him again. And let's jump into our number 1 city, which is Seattle. Now the big question, with the return to Seattle, will it be the SuperSonics or could it be a different actual franchise with a different name? What do I think is going to happen there? And when I talked to Jacob and when I kind of commissioned him into helping me with this video and making some designs, I of course said, let's make it SuperSonics themed, but let's switch up that original logo which you see on the left. And he gave me 3 beautiful, fantastic logos that we could look at as the primary, secondary, and tertiary logos of this new redesign, new branding of the Seattle SuperSonics, who are making a return in this video. See, the top left logo of the 3 would be the primary in my eyes. The one on the right would be kind of the secondary. And then you have that generic S that looks really good. I think kind of that modern look, of course, is featured on both the primary and secondary logo, but that's a tertiary logo that you'll see throughout the video. Overall, I think just a flat out beautiful design by Jacob, and I think he did a great job with these logos. And that's not where he left it. He actually went on to make jerseys for each NBA expansion franchise for this video, and the first one here these are beautiful. He made association jerseys, icon jerseys. He also has statement and city jerseys. He also has a classic jersey for the Sonics. So he went all out in these, and as you can tell, the designs here are just beautiful. He did a fantastic job with these. The association jersey, of course, super sleek and clean, kind of modernized their old look to fit what NBA jerseys look like today. Of course, the Sonics were around back when Adidas was actually in charge of the jerseys, and now Nike is the company that creates these jerseys. And because of that, there's been kind of an alteration in how these jerseys look on the court. I think Jacob did a very good job actually kind of building that into his designs. That icon jersey, I mean, I would literally have to get so many different jerseys here from the Sonics if these came to fruition, because just look at how beautiful these are. And of course, he used that nice Kevin Durant numbering to pay homage. A really beautiful jersey to look at, both the association and the icon jerseys. And let's take a look at those city and statement ones as well that I alluded to earlier. The city one, really bright, a lot of yellow there, but I think those shorts would be one of the highest selling shorts in the NBA because it's got that nice Seattle skyline, which you saw earlier on when we teased which city we were coming to. The Seattle SuperSonics city skyline here with that really nice kind of Indiana Pacers styled circular font around the numbering, something we have seen before. Of course, he also chose to include Amazon as the branding and kind of the sponsor for the team, and I think that's really a smart touch on things. Of course, Amazon from that region, from that area. So I think just overall another beautiful design in those statement jerseys. You know, kind of a nice subtle light neon color accenting that dark black. It just looks really good. These jerseys are very well made, very well designed. And then perhaps the favorite for a lot of people in this video is going to be the throwback to the classics for the Seattle SuperSonics, paying homage to those Gary Payton, Sean Kemp days with a, again, new redesigned look with the Nike logo. Of course, the coloring a little bit lighter. Typically what we've seen from a lot of the Nike jerseys is they've picked up in color a little bit, look a little bit lighter on the eyes, and I think this is another really great redesign of those. You get the overall feel, the overall sentiment, but it does have a slightly different look to it, so it's not just flat out copy paste. I think Jacob, again, just did such a great job designing these, and it'd be awesome to see players actually playing in these jerseys. Reminder, we're going to have an expansion draft a little bit later on. This is going to be a fully encompassing video of what NBA expansion could look like, not just the cities, not just the jerseys, but also what a roster could look like, what it could look like in the NBA draft with an expansion team or two in there. And since we're doing two of them, let's jump into that second team now, and we're headed out to Las Vegas. I teased that earlier in the NBA cities portion. Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada, and that's where the NBA is headed to for the first time in a while. And of course, they do have a sister team in the WNBA, the Las Vegas Aces, of course. And Las Vegas has actually been kind of a central city for expansion and relocation in very recent sports history. You think about the Aces, of course, coming into the WNBA. You also pay attention to the Las Vegas Raiders moving from Oakland. The Athletics are destined to move to Las Vegas now at this point. And then also the expansion in the NHL of the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And with that all being said, Jacob did a great job with this design for what is now the Las Vegas Outlaws. The new logo there on the left, I think a really neat looking logo, and it perfectly captures some of the colors that we've seen in other sports teams in Las Vegas. I think a key theme for Vegas sports teams, of course the Raiders kept their kind of iconic look, but there's been a lot of rebranding or just like overall coloring that matches each other. In Las Vegas, you see the Aces kind of colorway, the white, gold, and red. The Golden Knights, of course, their kind of name is built around the word gold and golden. And Jacob did a great job kind of utilizing those colors, utilizing that branding into this completely fresh design for what an expansion team to Vegas could look like. And the Vegas Outlaws, I mean, isn't this just a great logo and just a great look for what an NBA team could be? I think that it's a really sleek design, a little bit different than what we see from a lot of current designs where a lot of teams have a basketball featured in their logo somewhere. You think about the Mavericks, the Kings, of course, have like actual basketballs in their logo. This Vegas Outlaws one does not, but I think it could be a really good start to maybe a shifting in branding in the NBA. Branding kind of goes in waves a little bit, where, you know, you think about teams in the 80s, their kind of logos all kind of match each other, and then graphic design just improves and kind of changes theory. And I think this could maybe be the ushering of a new theory in graphic design for sports teams where this is extremely sleek, very similar to kind of that Golden Knights feel when it comes to what the logo kind of represents. And I think maybe this would cause a shift in the NBA, what logos would look like. Maybe we'd see the return of that Dallas Mavericks hat logo that they used to have because of something like this that, maybe more obscure or, less just, oh, let's put a basketball in our logo type of feel would be prevalent. And I think this is a very beautiful I mean, I just absolutely love this. This is such a good design. Just completely pops off the screen. So he did a great job with this one. And let's jump into some of those jerseys. And these are some of my favorites I've seen ever, honestly, when it comes to mocked up jerseys or just kind of fictional designs for jerseys. He utilized piping and pinstripes in a way that is very subtle, but it just really makes these jerseys pop, especially with the colors, kind of that white, black, and red. It just looks really, really good. Kind of plain, generic colors, but I think in a city that's so eccentric, having kind of that subtlety, the nice, calm colors, just looks really, really good. Of course, sponsored by MGM. The betting and casinos would go crazy with a Vegas NBA team. And the association jerseys are beautiful. The icon jerseys are even better, I would say, with Las Vegas written across the chest. These just look really beautiful, and they're such good jerseys in general. And then let's jump into the statement jersey, which is very, very similar to the association and icon, of course, kind of mirroring that pinstriping, but with a black base and a red collar, red shoulders. Just looks really good and clean. I think that these are going to be some of the best jerseys in the NBA if we saw this design out on the court. But then the one that I absolutely fell in love with, and I think if this city were to gain an NBA franchise and this jersey was something that they actually put out on the court, the city jersey, I would buy it in a heartbeat regardless of who's on the roster, because he's got that real embodiment of Vegas with the Las Vegas design there on the chest. Of course, the Jordan branding now for that city jersey, and just the overall colorway, very unique with the white red striping around the collar and the shoulder areas. And just overall, every little element of the design. Of course, you see the common symbols that are on cards. Of course, the casino and gambling is so prevalent in Las Vegas, especially if you've been there. I'm just in love with these jerseys. I feel like I'm raving about how great of a job Jacob did, and it's because they are so fantastic. He couldn't have done any better on these designs, in my opinion. I've loved every single one of them. And with that being said, those are the jerseys that we have. So let's actually go forward now and take a look at what some of those expansion draft rules are, because I think it's really important to talk about that as we kind of lead into the actual expansion draft portion of this video, where the Las Vegas Outlaws GM is going to be Chris Keesee from Keesee Hoop Scouting on Twitter, and then I will be GMing the Seattle SuperSonics. So let's get into rule number 1 here. Expansion teams cannot draft unrestricted free agents, which is really important because when we talk about what players can and cannot be protected, teams, of course, will not protect unrestricted free agents then, because the expansion teams themselves cannot draft those players. So because of that, you don't have to worry about, say, a player like Nikola Vucevic, who's headed toward free agency, or Brook Lopez. So you won't see those players featured in today's video at all. Then going into another key element of the expansion draft, expansion teams can make trades with pre-existing teams during the expansion draft. So for example, if a team left a player with a lot of money on their contract unprotected, that team could theoretically say, hey, we'll even give you a second round pick if you go out and draft the guy that we want you to take so that you can help us out with our cap space situation. Sometimes we've seen this in the past where an expansion team would try and kind of increase their asset haul by drafting to help out other GMs. It's also really good for relationship building for maybe GMs and executives who are new to the NBA, trying to get a lay of the land and work with these other high-ranking executives and people in the NBA. So that is a pathway we have seen before. Then also, one really important thing about the expansion draft, only one player from each currently existing team can be selected. So for example, if someone were to take, say, an Atlanta Hawk in the expansion draft, all the other Atlanta Hawks are now ineligible to be selected. So a team cannot lose more than one guy during the expansion draft. So if you do have a bunch of good players unprotected, the silver lining there for teams that are deep is you're only going to lose one of them. So that's an important thing to keep in mind too as we go through the actual expansion draft later in this video. Each team can protect up to 8 players. So each currently existing team can protect 8 guys at maximum. You'll see those now in this video, and I'm going to explain why some of those players were unprotected. Let's go in alphabetical order. For Atlanta, you'll see some of the players that were protected on here. I don't feel like I have to explain all of them, but for some players who were unprotected, first of all, John Collins with his contract, I felt like was a player that the Atlanta Hawks were definitely willing to unprotect and leave unprotected here because they're kind of calling the bluff of another team, these new expansion franchises, on if they'd actually be willing to select John Collins, just given the contract status that he currently has. And then Jalen Johnson, for him, it was just really tough to see them protecting him over AJ Griffin, who was just drafted in the top 16 in last year's draft. Of course, Onyeka Okongwu, a guy they really like, and Sadiq Bey was really the first player that Landry Fields, their new GM, brought in via trade. So it's a tough call on whether they would actually protect Sadiq Bey or Jalen Johnson. I think Hawks fans would prefer Jalen Johnson to be protected, but they themselves here decided to go with Sadiq Bey as a protection in this video. Now, if you feel like Jalen Johnson would be protected, just, kind of understand that these things are somewhat interchangeable. It's hard to perfectly project what all 30 NBA franchises will do. Moving on to the Boston Celtics, I think this one's pretty cut or dry, right? They protect their 8 best players. Danilo Gallinari opts into his player option at about $6.3 million or so. It's not like it's a terrible contract, but they'd prefer kind of their key core that they've had over the last 2 years, and because of that, they leave that other grouping unprotected. I think Sam Hauser, definitely one of those interesting names to monitor for the expansion draft. Then the Brooklyn Nets, we move on to that team, and they do have some notable unprotected players. Ben Simmons, I think, of course, the most notable, the highest profile name in there, and a big reason why is the contract status. He's got 2 years left on his deal, about $73 million owed to him over those 2 years. It's massive money. It's a massive commitment. The Nets are kind of in a position right now where they're stuck paying it. But Simmons, someone who has all-star experience, all-defense experience, is it possible that he could actually be selected in the expansion draft? Maybe the Nets would be willing to give up some second-round picks, maybe even a first-round pick to kind of incentivize the team to select him through the expansion draft. That would be something to watch. Joe Harris, kind of his contract situation as well, and he's just aging at this point. David Duke Jr., I think he was a player they would have liked to protect, but with some of their other key pieces and trade pieces that they have, I thought David Duke Jr. was kind of that odd man out for that team. The Charlotte Hornets, a team that has actually a decent amount of young depth and talent. There was some players, Gordon Hayward, because of his contract, they left unprotected. Cody Martin, they would have liked to protect him, but I felt like they would have preferred some of their former first round and high second round picks like Bryce McGowan's Kai Jones. So Cody Martin just kind of finds himself on the odd man out list. Chicago Bulls, you see they protect kind of the cast you'd expect. Unprotected is Lonzo Ball. He's, of course, one of the main names to watch for in this expansion draft. There's a lot of rumors right now that he might not ever play again in the NBA. And because of that, with his contract status, the Bulls might be willing to unprotect him and see, is a team going to be willing to select him from us and kind of take him off of our hands because of the injury status? That's a big question to watch for. Otherwise, all of the other players, I think, are pretty cut and dry obvious as to why. The Cleveland Cavaliers, this one was, I think, pretty clear and obvious as well. I think the only player they would have liked to protect that they couldn't was Isaiah Mobley. Otherwise, the other guys, I mean, Lamar Stevens, I know they like him as well. But I just don't think that over their other contributors, they could have really rationalized that in this video. Dallas Mavericks, this was a pretty cut and dry answer as well. They've got 8 players they'd like to protect. I would argue only 7 players they'd actually like to protect. And then the other 2 that are unprotected, that aren't unrestricted free agents, Davis Bertans and JaVale McGee, both back contracts. So the Mavericks would have no issues with those 2 guys getting selected through the expansion draft at all. The Denver Nuggets, the reigning NBA champions now at this point, they have a pretty clear 8 guys that they would like to keep, I think. Now, Zeke Naji, Vlatko Cancar, and Colin Gillespie, pretty solid young players. So I think one of those three guys could definitely be selected in this expansion draft. We'll see where they go. Gillespie, a talented passer and decision maker, just smart player in general. Zeke Naji has some athleticism to him, was a former first-round pick. So we'll see what happens there with those players. But then for the Detroit Pistons, this was a team that was a little difficult as well. I considered not protecting Killian Hayes, but just given the fact that Troy Weaver did select him in the top 10 only a few years ago, I decided that guys like RJ Hampton, Isaiah Livers, who either weren't selected by Troy Weaver or were selected just naturally lower in the draft, would probably be more available, and because of that, they left those guys unprotected. The Golden State Warriors, pretty clear listing here as well as to who to protect and who not to. I do think there was a couple difficult decisions between Kuminga and Moody, they felt like they had to protect those guys because they're former lottery picks, whereas Gary Payton II, I know they really like him, but with his age and where he's currently at in his career, maybe they're more willing to let him go. Dante DiVincenzo as well, I know they like him, but just given where he's at on a player option, they felt a little bit more willing to leave him unprotected too. The Houston Rockets, I think for the most part, pretty clear. Did leave Josh Christopher unprotected. I know he's a talented shot maker, but I feel like he's a little redundant with Jalen Green. So because of that, I think they'd prefer to keep a little bit more flexibility and kind of different archetypes, different play styles in the building with Ime Udoka. So you have Ty Washington, Usman Garuba protected now instead of Christopher. Jayshawn Tate, Dyson next, Darius Days, I think, pretty clearly wouldn't be protected over some of those other guys. The Indiana Pacers, they have Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, Buddy Hield. I mean, you look at the list, it makes sense. Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Isaiah Jackson. They left TJ McConnell unprotected. I think McConnell's actually a really strong, solid backup, but I just felt like with where he's at in his career, they couldn't protect him over some of those young guys that they'd prefer to kind of match up with Halliburton's prime and longevity in the league. So because of that, there was a few players that you had to leave unprotected, but I'm trying my best here to make this as realistic as possible. The LA Clippers, a team with a lot of depth, so there's going to be some good pieces left unprotected. Marcus Morris Sr., Robert Covington, Amir Coffey, BJ Boston, Jason Preston, Moussa Diabate, even an intriguing athlete. So pretty good grouping here that's unprotected from the Clippers. So you could argue that maybe some of these guys should have been protected, and maybe on other teams they would have been if the Clippers weren't so deep. The Lakers, not a lot to rave about from the unprotected category. Now, Cole Swider, Scottie Pippen Jr., I think there is some upside in this league for them, roles that they could probably fit and fill. But at this point, I didn't really see a reason to protect them over kind of the other players. Malik Beasley, Mo Bamba, two contracts that I think are going to be pivotal for the Lakers to use as trade chips. Beasley at $16 million, Bamba at 10, that gets you to $26 million of tradable contracts, which is really important for their actual cap flexibility moving forward. Moving on to the Memphis Grizzlies now, another team with a lot of depth and a lot of youth talent as well. And for me, I didn't want to break up too much of their current existing core, like John Morant, of course, Jaren Jackson Jr., Bane, those three are untouchable. But then some key contributors like Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, Tyus Jones, and then the fact with where they took Zaire Williams in the lottery and Jake LaRavia last year, I felt like I had to protect those two guys for them. So they had some really intriguing players who were unprotected. Luke Kennard, I think the best current player out of that list that's unprotected, but David Roddy, a solid young player who I liked in last year's draft. Conchar, Aldama, both talented forwards. Kenneth Lofton, of course, a fan favorite, I would say. There's some really impressive names in this grouping, and I think it goes to show how deep this Grizzlies roster is. You could maybe argue that maybe LaRavia doesn't get protected, or maybe Zaire Williams doesn't in favor of one of these other guys. But I had struggles with saying, oh well, they'd protect Kennard over LaRavia or Zaire Williams, just with kind of what that investment looked like to get those two guys. So because of that, I ended up protecting those younger players for them. The Miami Heat, unprotected Kyle Lowry at $29 million. That of course makes sense. Oladipo, $9 million player option. He's not going to play next year. It just makes sense. And then Omer Yurtseven, I think really the name to watch for as a potential expansion selection in this video. I thought that they would have liked to protect him, but also Orlando Robinson had nice flashes this past year. He's a little bit younger. So because of that, I opted for them to protect Robinson, not protect Yurtseven. We'll see what happens with him in the expansion draft. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think their top 8 was pretty clear. Marjon Beauchamp, first-round pick last year, is really the only guy who hasn't proven much in the NBA on this list, but I think at some point he will. And then their 2 unprotecteds, Lindell Wigginton, AJ Green. We'll see if either of them get selected, but Wigginton, a good half-court scorer. AJ Green, definitely a sniper, someone who can shoot. So we'll see. Maybe those 2 guys get selected. One of them possibly will. We'll see what happens. The Minnesota Timberwolves, I think a pretty good collection of talent here that they were able to protect. Of course, keeping a good amount of their veterans in the building. Did unprotect a former first-round pick in Wendell Moore. Jordan McLaughlin, who in an expansion draft, I'd be shocked if he actually got selected. Josh Minott, a guy I know that they like as well. Nathan Knight, Luka Garza, and Matt Ryan all go unprotected. I think there's arguments that any of those guys could fit somewhere. We'll see what happens, though, in the expansion draft. The New Orleans Pelicans. This is another team, just like what I talked about with Memphis. They're really talented, young, and deep, and because of that, there's a lot of good unprotected players here. But I felt like, the top 3, Zion, Brandon, and McCollum, are all clear protects. Trey Murphy, there's no way they wouldn't protect him. Herb Jones, Dyson Daniels, who they picked in the top 10 last year, they would definitely protect. Jonas Valanciunas, I think, such an important part of their current team and just like for a contract that's tradable, Valanciunas, I think, is important for them, not only flexibility-wise, but with their current roster construction. And then Jose Alvarado, of course, a fan favorite there. I opted for him over some of these others because I felt like they're a little bit deeper on the wing than they are at guard, which is why I protected Alvarado for them and not Najee Marshall, who I think that's a really tough decision to have them make. I think they would love to protect 9, maybe 10 guys, but ultimately you can't do that. So Najee Marshall, probably the top candidate here from the New Orleans Pelicans to not be protected. The New York Knicks, again, another good example of a team with good depth and a lot of youth talent. They had to leave some really good players unprotected. Isaiah Hartenstein, Jericho Sims, Deuce McBride, Daquan Jeffries, even Isaiah Roby, Trevor Keels, all solid players as well. So I think, the 2 big men there, Hartenstein and Sims, probably the 2 key players to watch, but you could also maybe look at Deuce McBride as an intriguing kind of backup defensive guard who I think does have a long-term future in this league. Oklahoma City, another example here of talented young depth, and I think clearly the teams that would get hurt most by an expansion is the teams that are deepest, have the most youth talent, because they can't protect everybody. With only protecting 8 guys, I opted to protect Aleksej Pokusevski. Don't know if that was really the right call or not, but I chose for unprotected Isaiah Joe, Trey Mann, Kenrich Williams. I mean, there's a lot of talented players here. Again, for the Oklahoma City Thunder, so I think it's a tough call, but ultimately one that Sam Presti would have to make a decision. The Orlando Magic, another team with some pretty good depth. I decided to unprotect Jonathan Isaac, specifically because of his contract and also just his injury status. Gary Harris, he's on an expiring deal. Don't view him as a long-term piece. And then really the toughest decision for me here was kind of between Goga Bitadze and Caleb Houston. They took Houston in the second round last year. Bitadze they picked up this season after the Pacers cut him. I think Bitadze had a pretty nice run with the Magic after getting signed by them, but ultimately I felt like the guy they took in the actual draft would probably hold a little bit more weight within the organization. The 76ers, pretty clear grouping here. Tobias Harris, he's going to be the name to watch for in the unprotected category simply because he makes a ton of money, $39 million. And if they were to have him selected, it would open up a massive trade exception for them that they could take in not 1, not 2, but maybe even 3 good role players, or they could kind of split that up into a bigger contract and find a way to add in even more talent. Definitely would give them kind of assets to work with and play around with. And as long as James Harden is a player option, they do have to technically protect him. Otherwise, they would lose his bird rights. So that's a little caveat there of important information for Philadelphia. The Phoenix Suns, pretty clear. This team doesn't have a lot of depth, and some of the players that they do, you're kind of saying, okay, well, Darius Baisley, really? But the reason I have Chris Paul unprotected is because there's already rumors about him potentially being waived. Saban Lee's a two-way guy. I just don't think that they would actually protect him. The Portland Trailblazers, not really in love with any of the pieces that they have unprotected. Honestly, Cam Reddish, John Butler would be the guy that would really stand out to me because he's lengthy and can shoot a little bit. It's kind of a long development process you'd have to wait for, though. But I mean, their protections are pretty obvious, right? I mean, it's not really anything that you're going to say, oh, well, that's not what they would do. I think the only one you can maybe argue a little bit is Keon Johnson, but even then, I just don't. Who would they protect over him? I thought maybe they don't protect Nurkic, but in terms of trade flexibility and actual just trying to win, Nurkic I think is more important than Keon Johnson for them right now. Sacramento Kings, pretty clear answers again. Kessler Edwards was kind of my last addition. I thought about PJ Dozier, Keon Ellis as possible replacements for him, but I just didn't really see that very likely. I think they like Kessler Edwards. I think they like what they got from him. And then the unprotected category, Rashawn Holmes, I think is a clear and obvious unprotect because of his price point right now, his salary, and just the fact that under Mike Brown, he didn't really have a role this past season. The San Antonio Spurs, I mean, pretty clear. I think Sandro Mamukelashvili is probably the one surprise on there. I think, looking past guys like Dominic Barlow, Doug McDermott, there's some tough calls, but ultimately, I think this is probably the grouping that they would protect. The Toronto Raptors, you protect the young guys, you protect some of the tradable pieces. Gary Trent Jr. and Fred VanVleet actually both do have player options again, so unless you're counting on losing those guys, then you could theoretically unprotect them. But since they have player options, you have to commit to protecting them if you want to hold their bird rights. And honestly, there's only one player that I thought they would have liked to protect that maybe they didn't get done here, which is Delano Banton, a player who I know Raptors fans absolutely love. I do too. So we'll see where he goes in the expansion draft. A little bit of a spoiler. I'm guessing he gets picked in that expansion draft. The Utah Jazz are second to last team. They protect kind of the key pieces. Chris Dunn's probably the one surprise name on there. If you told me a year ago the Utah Jazz would be protecting Chris Dunn in an expansion draft, I would say, wait, what now? But ultimately, that's what I decided. Some of these other guys, even if they're somewhat young, I just think that Chris Dunn kind of fits a little bit closer to what Danny Ainge's theory is on team building and just winning basketball. I think Chris Dunn advances this team a little bit further than those other pieces. And then the Washington Wizards. For them, the protects are pretty clear, I thought. Had a tough call between DeLon Wright and Monte Morris, but ultimately didn't bring myself to really caring about either. Monte Morris a little bit smaller, so I thought, DeLon Wright defensively a little bit better and gets downhill a little bit easier, kind of a better slasher. So I figured they'd protect DeLon Wright over Monte Morris. I think that could go either way. Honestly, I'm going to be pretty transparent with you. I don't think that's going to make a big deal in Washington Wizards franchise history when it's all said and done if one of DeLon Wright or Monte Morris are protected or unprotected, if there was a real expansion. And then Isaiah Todd, maybe one of those names that would be an interesting pickup, but realistically, the Wizards aren't very deep and they're not very good, so I don't know if any of these players are going to go a long way in moving the needle for an expansion franchise. But with all that said, those are the players that are protected and unprotected. Those are the players you have to keep your eye on. And today I'm joined by Chris Keesee, who's on Twitter. Link to his Twitter is going to be in the description. He's a really bright basketball mind. I think has a lot of really great pieces that he writes about the NBA draft. So I know you guys like my NBA draft content. I definitely would recommend checking him out on Twitter as well. Him and I have been kind of talking for a little while now about this video and what it's going to look like. We're really excited to be bringing the actual expansion draft now. Earlier in this video, you guys did see kind of what went into this expansion, who's protected, who's not. Now we're going to be picking from those unprotected players. And Chris actually has the first overall pick. So you take us away here, Chris, and we'll serpentine from there.
All right, so for my first pick, I'm going to go with Lonzo Ball from Chicago Bulls. Now, I know Lonzo's been dealing with some injury stuff, really gruesome injury that people are saying that he might not come back from, but I still have hope in him. And for the first pick, I felt like we need an offensive anchor, somebody who knows how to create offense for his teammates, and somebody who also knows how to dish it once he creates that advantage. So we're going to go with Lonzo Ball from the Chicago Bulls with the first pick. We need that offensive anchor.
And one pick in, you already see why I chose Chris to do this video with me, because he took literally my number 1 player on my board, because I was
Oh,
hoping
really?
that Lonzo Ball would be there for me, even with some of those injury concerns. But there it is, Chris stealing him from me. So second overall, I'm going to follow it up with a player who I'm interested to see where you have him on your board. But I'm actually going to take Najee Marshall from the New Orleans Pelicans, second overall. I really like him defensively. In this expansion draft, like outside of Lonzo Ball, it's gonna be difficult to find like a young offensive engine like Chris was talking about. So for me, I think I'm gonna shape my team more defensively and then try and use my draft pick later to perhaps grab an offensive engine or somebody I can kind of run through a little bit. Not with the expectation of winning a ton of games in year one, but just trying to put together a competent roster with players who can fit around other pieces. And I'm starting here with Najee Marshall, small contract, young player. For me, I think that fits pretty well. I'm going to follow that up third overall with another guy who's a good fit around other players, and that's Luke Kennard for the Memphis Grizzlies. He's in his mid-20s as well. I like his shooting. Of course, shot a ridiculous percentage from 3 this past year. So my first 2 picks, Najee Marshall, Luke Kennard, and we're back to Chris for pick 4.
All right. So just like you were saying, I'm just tracking Grizzlies, Nuggets, they're off the board. All right. So like you said previously about the defensive stuff, now I'm going to go like a sort of like a defensive anchor, an anchor for the interior, and that's going to be Jericho Sims from the New York Knicks. I feel like he can provide solid rebounding, really good rebounding, excellent lob threat, a lot of upside as a rim protector, and he can just be somebody where teams don't feel comfortable attacking the paint, getting those rim touches, and I feel like he can be a good anchor for the defense. I'm trying to go sort of young guys, so Jericho Sims. That's
I really like that selection. I'm going to throw in a little nugget here before your next pick. I actually faced Jericho Sims my last high school game of basketball. I played against Jericho Sims. Nearly got dunked on. I'll try and put that clip in here right now for everyone to laugh at. I think I did score like 14 points that game against an NBA guy, so probably my proudest basketball moment.
Yeah,
but yeah, no, he's a darn good basketball player. That's a really good selection for one of the most athletic bigs in the league.
We're gonna go with Cole Swider. That's a little
wow,
a little turning point. Yeah. Hasn't played much with the Lakers so far in this season, but when you look at the fact that he's 6'9", excellent spot up ability, I feel like he can be a really good complementary player to Lonzo out of the spot ups. And yeah, I think we can expect to see him a lot more production from him in like real life Lakers next season. I'm hoping, because I feel like he can provide a good amount of floor spacing and serviceable complementary skills. So I'm gonna choose Cole Swider to be on my wing.
That's a really underrated selection. I know a lot of people might not even know who Cole Swider is. That's a really, really good pick, actually.
Yeah.
And a guy that I thought like, hey, maybe I can get him later. Nope. And this is part of, again, why I wanted to do this with you, Chris, because you're just stealing my board here in front of me. With my next selection, I'm going to go with Jonathan Isaac from the Orlando Magic. He's an interesting player for this, in my opinion, because when he's been healthy, when he's been on the court, I think he has flashed that he is like possibly a top 5, top 10 defender in the NBA. Very versatile. Right. But again, kind of with the Lonzo Ball thing, you're looking at a player who the injury concerns, especially his historical injuries, have really hindered his career. So I am taking on some money here against the cap. It's an interesting way to go about team building, but I do think if he's on the floor, him and Najee Marshall on the wings is a defensive tandem I really like. And, you know, let's get crazy here. I'm already committing some cap space. So let's go ahead and take Ben Simmons here with the next selection. Bailing the Brooklyn Nets out of that contract. Probably not my smartest pick because he's owed a ton of money and it does hurt my team's financial flexibility. But I'm looking at it with the option of who else could be an offensive engine, who's going to run the point for me at this spot. And Ben Simmons really probably the best option available, even if you don't love it. So for that reason, I feel like I have the shooting with Kennard. I feel like I've got 2 defensive wings. I'm going to add in another defensive player in Simmons who, if he gets healthy and kind of comes through that back injury a little bit better, I feel like he could be a really nice pickup here. But again, I'm taking on some risk here with this one.
Nice. Yeah, a player that I'm about to choose is kind of similar to Ben Simmons in a way in regards to like the defensive versatility, the ability to run point forward, and that's going to be Jalen Johnson from Atlanta.
Wow. Good pick.
Not
That's
really
literally the next guy
underrated.
up on my board.
Yeah. Really, really underrated floor general skills off the forward spot. He hasn't shown that much with the Hawks, but I saw some G League stuff from him, and even tracing back to high school, really underrated floor general stuff from the forward. Could play the point forward. Really uh, versatile defensive option. I feel like he can be somebody you can throw on 1 through 4 maybe in his prime, and yeah, that's just something to really be a defensive help in the interior.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong selection again there, going with Jalen Johnson. It's just funny because I just feel like every single pick you're taking the next guy on my board, so I'm like, shoot. Who do you got next here for I believe, what is that, 7th overall?
I'm gonna go with another spot up shooting bet. A little streaky so far in his career, but I'll trust the shooting in this scenario and the defensive. Maybe we can get the defense to come around. He has some of the tools for it, but it's going to be a bit of a project. But we're going to go with Cam Reddish.
Cam Reddish from the Blazers. Interesting pick. I did not have him on my board at all, actually. I completely excluded him. But interesting because he is a former lottery pick. So do you see him kind of as like a bench piece for your team so far? Or what are you kind of thinking on that role for him?
I think he could be like a six man, or even a bit of a starter for the role. We're gonna have to see in the upcoming selections, but I wanted to get Ben Simmons, but you chose him. So we're gonna go with a more perimeter oriented piece. We're gonna go with Cam Reddish. I feel like he could be interchanged between starter, 6-man. We'll see.
I like that. With the 10th overall pick in this expansion draft, I'm going to take Isaiah Joe from the Oklahoma City Thunder. And a big part of what I was looking for in this is, like I've mentioned a couple of times, just kind of guys who fit prototypes or roles. And for Isaiah Joe, not necessarily like a full-on movement shooter, but a very good spot-up shooter. And once he does have his feet actually set, he's a really good shooter. I think for Oklahoma City, he showcased that this year playing off of Giddey and Shea and everyone there who can kind of drive and dish out of that. So I think off of Ben Simmons, if I'm trying to make Ben Simmons work, I want to have not one but 2 shooters on the floor. So Kennard and Isaiah Joe probably going to be starting wings for me, or starting kind of guard / small forwards, I guess, for my roster. And then with my next selection, I'm going to go with a little bit of upside here from the Toronto Raptors. I'm going to take Delano Banton, 11th overall. And for Banton, he hasn't really shown a ton in the NBA, but his Raptors 905 experience has been really, really good. He's averaging over 20 points a game, I think this past season in the G League. So he's been a productive G League player. And I think when you're looking at kind of drafting for this, it's about whose upside do you want to kind of bet on and believe in. And for me with Banton, kind of the size, the playmaking, that he's flashed a little bit. I see him kind of as like a hybrid point forward type that can do some of the handling for me. The shot that's still, is a concern, but I think for the upside here compared to the other guys left on the board, I prefer him at this spot.
Nice. All right, so now let's see, that's 1 through 5. We're gonna go with a backup floor general, backup offensive anchor, and we're gonna go with Jason Preston from the Clippers.
That's a
I love what I saw from him in Ohio. G League stint, really willing passer, knows how to deliver timely passes, knows how to get guys involved. Will be a guy that, spot up shooters, role men will love playing with. And I feel like he's just, that perfect backup floor general that teams will love to have in the future.
Very strong selection.
I'm hoping he can get some minutes with the Clippers, but we'll see. That's an interesting situation over there, but we'll see.
Yeah, I like Jason Preston a lot too. I was really high on him in his draft. I think the fact that he went to the Clippers is kind of unfortunate for him because that team's typically so deep that he hasn't really gotten a lot of opportunities to play significant minutes yet. But I think that's a really strong selection.
We're gonna go with Doug McDermott from the San Antonio Spurs. Another wing shooting option. I'm really big on shooting, big on floor spacing, just having room for guys to work with. So We're gonna go with Doug McDermott. I feel like he's a really good spot up option that you can't leave open. You always gotta stay attached, and that'll be somebody that Lonzo Ball, Jason Preston will love playing with, as well as like the roadmen. They'll have their space from McDermott's spacing. So I feel like it'll be a good selection to choose McDermott.
McDermott's a nice pickup there, and like you're saying, like kind of that floor spacing. I mean, just having guys who can stretch out the floor a little bit just goes a long way in making your offense actually like solid. So I think that's a good selection. For me here, 14th overall, I'm going to actually take, and I think this one might be a little bit of a shocker. I'm going to take Chris Paul from the Phoenix Suns.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I looked at him as an unprotected player in this because obviously the reports of them potentially waiving him at some
Right.
point or at least exploring a trade makes me believe that the Suns would prefer to keep other guys under contract and protected. And I am taking on his money here, which is somewhat significant. So his contract plus Ben Simmons' contract plus Jonathan Isaac's contract doesn't leave me with a lot of cap space this offseason. But I'm okay with that just because I'm kind of operating under the idea that maybe my expansion franchise in Seattle wouldn't be able to land a big name free agent for the first couple of years anyway. So I think bringing Chris Paul in will help with fan interest. And I also think kind of like setting up guys like Najee Marshall, Luke Kennard, Isaiah Joe with opportunities out of the pick and roll. Pretty important for my team. So I'm going to go with Chris Paul at that spot. And then I'm going to come back one pick later. Oh man, I'm so mad that you took Jericho Sims earlier, but I'm gonna take Omer Yurtseven here from the Miami Heat with the next.
He was on my board. Yeah.
And Yurtseven's like that perfect summer league big that like just comes in and dominates guys, and you're just like, wow, could this guy become something down the road? There are some challenges to playing him defensively. I think you're gonna have to utilize zone a little bit heavier with him on the floor. I mean, Miami does that already a decent amount, but he does offer really good just pure size for the position, and I think that his post scoring skill set does pan out pretty well with something I'm lacking from this team right now. I'm pretty much all wings and guards, so I needed some big man. So Yurtseven is going to be my selection here, 15th overall.
All right, nice. You know what? We're gonna go back to the big man. We're gonna go back to the big man on this. We're gonna choose. Wait, is he still available? We're gonna choose Vernon Carey from the Utah Jazz. Not somebody who's had a lot of NBA experience so far in his career, but when you look at Carey, big body in the post, that'll help with the rebounding. Really, really, really good post touch. I feel like he showed a really good post touch at Duke. But like I said, he hasn't been able to get those minutes yet. But I feel like he can be somebody who can rebound, specialize in rebounding, defending the rim, being like that drop defender, somebody who's not the most versatile, but can be like a drop defender and finish efficiently with, around the rim. So we're going to go with somewhat a defensive anchor, more like a rebounding anchor, but we're going to go with Vernon Carey.
I like that. You get an athletic big in there at least too, which is something I was kind of hoping to come back and maybe grab him later with Chris Paul and see if I could turn him into a nice rim presence. But that's a good selection there for sure.
And then let's see. I'm trying to keep track of like all the teams that like you can't choose from anymore.
Yeah, I think that's like the most the hardest part to do even is like just keeping track of guys. So far, we've nailed it, I think so.
Yeah, we're good. Let's go to Golden State. We're gonna go Dante DiVincenzo.
There it is.
We're gonna get that. Yeah, we're gonna get that perimeter defense. Just a perfect complementary role player that we can have for the roster. Somebody who can do all the little things, be that connecting piece, 3-and-D even, and yeah, we're gonna need some defense in the perimeter, so this would be a good addition for us.
I like that selection too. That was literally the next guy up on my board, so bummer to see him go. But now I'm at a spot here where I'm choosing between two players on the same organization. I'm looking at two Houston Rockets currently, Josh Christopher and Darius Days, and I think I'm leaning towards actually selecting Darius Days, despite Christopher kind of having that former first-round pedigree. And the reason I like Days is for the Rio Grande Valley Vipers this past year. He actually finished top 5 in total three-pointers made in the G League this past season. And he offers pretty decent size at about 6'8", 6'9", kind of that power forward. I see him kind of like growing into maybe a JaMychal Green type player. which
Right.
for me right now, kind of adding to my depth, it's just like I'm really trying to prioritize shooting and floor spacing for a lot of these pieces. So I feel like Daves is somebody who could grow and improve his skill sets, and I just think at least he's going to give me some perimeter shot making. And then
Nice.
following that up, I think I'm going to, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to select Sam Hauser with my next selection from the Boston Celtics. I'm going with Hauser again for kind of the shooting. Trying to hoard as much shooting in this draft as possible, just because I want guys who, after we come back with our actual draft pick this year, I'm hoping that we have some type of player who can create for others and open up the floor a little bit for some of these shot makers. So shooting off the bench is always good, and that's what I'm going with here with Hauser.
Bet. Let's see. Yeah, I'm trying to focus on shooting right now too. Let's see. We're gonna go with. Let's go with Jordan Nwora. So yeah, we're gonna go with Jordan Nwora, wing forward shooter, good frame that'll hold up defensively. I feel like he'll just provide some of that floor spacing and versatility that we need in the future for like our team. So we're gonna go with Jordan Nwora for this pick. And then for the next. And then for the next, we're gonna go with an oddball, but I feel like he's one of the most athletic creators I've ever seen. And we're just gonna have him just because, and that's gonna be Darion Sebron. Darion Sebron from, I think, Pelicans. Yeah, Pelicans.
Pelicans.
Walking paint touch. I know this is kind of like a little awkward fit with Lonzo and Preston because Sebron's more like ball dominant, but the quality of shots that he's able to generate is insane. Like I don't think I've seen, like there's not a lot of people who can just force their way to the rim like he can, other than like, you know, the Thompson twins, Scoot, and those type of guys. But I feel like he's really underrated. I feel like if he gets an opportunity, people are gonna be like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? So we're going to go with Darion Sebron for another creation bet. Just a walking paint touch that would get guys in foul trouble and things of that nature.
That selection brought me back and sent chills down my spine back to the 2022 NBA Draft Combine, where like Darion Sebron was like one of the biggest risers.
Right. Yeah, he's just able to generate his own offense so easily.
Yeah, I really like that selection, Darion Sebron. I think honestly, like most people don't even probably know who he is, but he's just like actually a pretty good basketball player. I was shocked last year when he went undrafted because I thought like for sure would be. I thought like he was for sure gonna be a top 45 pick, and like he just didn't go. And I was like, what is going on? But that's a really strong selection. I'm going to follow that up here. I'm going to go with two kind of hybrid defensive wings. Kind of fit that criteria. First one I'm going to go with is Cody Martin from the Charlotte Hornets. Of course, his twin brother, Caleb Martin, has made a lot of money for himself this postseason with how he played for Miami. But I think with Cody Martin, funny enough, 3 years ago or so, I think most people kind of preferred Cody Martin over Caleb. But now, obviously, their careers have kind of shaped out a little bit differently. I think part of that is Caleb went to Miami. Cody Martin did not. But I think, he kind of has the frame and the athleticism that at least you're looking as like a wing type player, wing type defender. And I'm going to follow it up here with a former Michigan Wolverine who's playing for the Detroit Pistons, Isaiah Livers. I like his frame and strength too. For me, I'm just, again, trying to get some of those archetypes in the building for my expansion franchise. And just adding some pieces who I can trust on a night-to-night basis to go out there and defend. So
sure.
Cody Martin and Isaiah Livers, back-to-back selections here for me.
Cody Martin, Isaiah Livers. Okay. I'm just making sure all the teams are good. All right. And then, let's see. So I have a lot of shooting wings. I got the anchors, the defense. Okay, I'm going to go for more versatile defensive option. I'm trying to see if there's like a good versatile defensive option. You know what? We're gonna go with Isaiah Mobley from the Cavs. Did you choose the Cavs a player yet?
I have not. Isaiah Mobley was literally my next guy on my board. Dang it.
But we're just gonna choose Isaiah Mobley, brother of Evan Mobley, somebody who I feel like may not be the most versatile, but I don't know. I was probably going for a more versatile option, but we're gonna go with that paint protection. Somebody who can really alter shots just like his brother. Well, not just like his brother, but similar to his brother, in this scenario, but somebody who can really play finish on the cuts and the rolls, and yeah, somebody who could just really be a good defensive presence.
I like that pick. Isaiah Mobley can also step out behind the three-point line, knock down a ton of threes back at USC. Right. So, I mean, that's a really strong selection. I think that's a good pick, and maybe, who knows, maybe 5-6 years from now, if you have Isaiah Mobley on the roster, you can maybe poach away Evan Mobley in free agency or something too, if you position yourself that way.
And for the next one, we're gonna go with Keon Ellis from the Sacramento Kings. Really, 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 really good 3-and-D bet. Somebody who can just be that complimentary player. We're getting a lot of shooters. So we're going to add the defensive component to the shooting in this scenario. We're going to add Keon Ellis from the Kings. Really good player at Alabama. Really good complimentary piece at Alabama. And I feel like he's going to get some minutes in his NBA career, relatively simple NBA career, just off of the fact that he can be that great complimentary piece. So, yeah.
Nice selection. With my second to last pick, so I have 2 picks left, and then you have 1 selection left. With my second to last pick, I'm going to select Luka Garza from the Minnesota Timberwolves. I'm looking for another skilled big man.
Nice.
I feel like one thing that I would have really loved to draft is kind of an athletic big who can protect the rim. I didn't really get that in this draft as much. Yurtseven, obviously lengthy, but not as athletic, and Garza obviously not the best athlete either. But I do have talent at that position. Yurtseven can score down low. Garza has a little bit of a shot to him. Pretty good post scorer, obviously flashed at a ton at Iowa. So I think for me, that's what I'm going to land on with that selection. And then with my next pick, I'm going to try and at least get some athleticism. A former first-round selection, Zeke Naji from the Denver Nuggets, has kind of fallen out of favor there in Denver. Hasn't really played a ton. But I'm going to select him here because I think if he were to be given an opportunity and coached up a little bit, I think that there's like some of that switchability to him. And I kind of like the upside here as a potential grab at the very end of the expansion draft for me. So I'm going to snag him with my final pick. And then we got one more for you, Chris, before the actual NBA draft itself.
You know what? We're going to go with Tobias Harris for the last pick. You know, a 3-level scoring option, somebody who's like I want to say near the end of their career, but older prospect, somebody who could be like a good veteran presence for the younger guys, and somebody who can just do everything solid all around. So last pick, Tobias Harris. We're going to go with that veteran presence.
That's a pretty strong selection. I know some people are going to be confused as to how a former 20-point per game scorer goes last overall in a draft like this. I think a big part of it, and obviously you, I think, did a very good job kind of playing safe, especially with the money. Because Tobias Harris has 1 year left on his deal at $39 million, which is partially why he's unprotected here. It gives Philadelphia a lot of kind of flexibility, if they end up letting him get drafted. So you grabbed him last overall. He's probably one of the most talented players to actually get drafted in this.
Yeah.
And you grabbed him last. I wanted him, but I just couldn't bring myself to drafting him given the fact that I committed money to Simmons and Isaac and Chris Paul too. I just felt like I would have been in salary cap hell if I did that. But I think that's a really strong selection, especially since your team, I think, was relatively on the cheap end in terms of contracts. So you could definitely afford to make that type of selection. I think it's a really good one to end the draft. And now hopefully you guys did enjoy the expansion draft. Lastly, expansion teams typically pick in the middle of the top 10 for the actual NBA draft. So for the 2023 NBA draft in this video, the Vegas Outlaws GM, Chris Keesee, will pick 4th overall, which we're going under the assumption that Victor Wembanyama is off the board, Scoot Henderson's off the board, and Brandon Miller's off the board in the top 3. And I will be acting as the SuperSonics GM. I will pick 5th overall in this video, directly after Chris Keesee. So we've reshuffled the draft order a little bit. You'll see that in the video here now. And let's jump into the actual 2023 NBA draft.
We're going to go with Cam Whitmore. It might be a shock, but we're going to go with Cam Whitmore. I feel like he's that a lot of isolation upside, a lot of 3-level scoring upside from the wing. Really good defensive tools, strong-framed, athletic, can switch, I want to say, 1 through 4 maybe in his prime. So Thompson Twiz were a great option, really talented, but I think Cam Whitmore for the team is a better fit, and he's really talented and high upside in his own right.
Yeah, I think that's a really strong selection. Cam Whitmore, to me, I have a certain player in mind when I kind of give him like a draft comparison. I'm kind of interested. I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Who would you kind of loosely compare him to from some previous drafts that we've seen, or kind of what's an archetype that you see him as, like as a player?
Think Miles Bridges on the court for the Hornets. Think Miles Bridges, somebody who can really be that 20 points per game scorer, while providing two-way versatility, and somebody who's just really strong frame and tough to contain on the drives and things of that nature, while also being able to stretch the floor and shoot the three ball. So when I think of Cam, I think Miles Bridges on the court would be a really good comparison.
That's actually, yeah, that's a strong comp actually, because like for me, I kind of have seen more like Jaylen Brown in terms of like the downhill, like he's gonna slash but not really play make out of that.
Oh yeah, that's a good one too.
But Miles Bridges, like physically, that makes a ton of sense too. Which like now that you say, I'm gonna go watch some more Cam Whitmore tonight and just be like, like I'm gonna try and just see if I see some more of that Miles Bridges in there, because I do think that's actually a pretty good comp. And then with the 5th overall pick, now that one of my favorite players in this draft that he slid past number 4. I know you considered him. That's going to be Amen Thompson from Overtime Elite.
Yeah,
I'm a big Amen Thompson guy. I believe in the physicals. I believe in like kind of the functional athleticism that he possesses in terms of like he's athletic, but he's not just athletic in terms of like, oh, he's going to show out at the combine. He like literally displays his athleticism like possession by possession while playing.
Right.
And I think like now drafting him, it's going to be like a little bit of a patience period. I think that like year one there's gonna be some moments where you're like, oh my god, this guy has some really bad moments. But I think that there's gonna be like other moments where you're like, oh my goodness, could this guy end up being possibly the 2nd best player in the draft? Like I think his upside, if everything were to go right, I think he's on the same stratosphere potentially as Scoot Henderson. Now I'm not saying he's number 2 on my board, because he's not. I prefer Scoot. But I do think that the potential's there, and with the way I drafted my team with Luke Kennard, Isaiah Joe, Sam Hauser, some of the shooting I have around that, I think kind of spacing the floor off of him. I know you do a lot of great work looking at some of the data and stuff, and it's actually interesting. Like I said earlier, guys, go follow Chris on Twitter, because he's got really great content that he shares about the NBA draft. And you were talking about kind of like paint touches and how hard it is to get to the paint, and you're looking at Amen Thompson's shot diet, and I completely agree with that, because he was like 26% of his shots were in the paint only.
Right.
Something like. But I do think that just with his ability to get downhill, he does a good job keeping his eyes up and looking for either drop-off passes. And I've got 2 guys who have a decent amount of touch around the rim, in Yurtseven and Garza, who I think could be benefited by that, but also just some of that perimeter shooting to kind of keep the floor spread and let Amen Thompson kind of go to work. And we've got an interesting defensive team, some shooting, and I think Amen Thompson's the ribbon on top that I wanted for upside. So he'll be my build-around player in this. And
side note, Amen Thompson, I will say, pertain to that statistic, the floor spacing with OTE wasn't the best. So who knows? Maybe he can get like a greater percentage of paint touches in the NBA. Probably. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Amen Thompson's a really good pick.
Yeah, I love that. That's a very good point too on kind of the floors, but they didn't really have a lot. They had like one real shooter on the team for the City Reapers. So that's a great point as well. But now you're going to get a look here too at some of the actual final rosters, what it ended up looking like. I think Chris did a great job pioneering and GMing these Vegas Outlaws to a pretty intriguing roster, some really good young talent. Of course, prioritize a lot of cheap young players who are on good team-friendly contracts. Now, he did kind of sacrifice that a little bit at the end with Tobias Harris, who makes a ton of money, but for the most part, his cap picture does look a little bit cleaner, a little bit better than my team. But I went with a little bit more upside. I felt like guys who I think could make more of an immediate impact, just under the idea that maybe I can't draw in free agents early on in an expansion, because typically teams who are new to the NBA, or of course expansion franchises in general, they typically have a hard time kind of bringing in free agents and getting them into the building, just given the fact that it is a new startup, it is technically a new organization, a new franchise, a new business. Sometimes it's hard to sell people on what you're doing, and especially players and free agents. So for me, I kind of went with the fit and talent and upside route a little bit more with what can these players turn into, what could they actually look like, and how could they play together. And I think really wrapping it up with Amen Thompson was the perfect selection for me. I really like Cam Whitmore as a pick for Chris Keesee. Now, I myself do prefer Amen Thompson significantly over Cam Whitmore, even though I like Cam Whitmore. I think Amen Thompson has all the tools to maybe be a build-around guard if everything goes right in his development. So all in all, I really love the direction of my team. I think I have a lot of shooting to complement Amen Thompson and Ben Simmons. I think I have a lot of defensive flexibility and versatility. Honestly, maybe too much of it, where I didn't prioritize enough offense. But hopefully Amen Thompson can be that kind of offensive engine and creator for me. I had a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Huge thank you, Chris, for hopping on. It was a lot of fun doing this with you. Like I said, guys, make sure to go check out his Twitter. Links in the description for that. It's going to be like right at the top. So click on that. Go give him a follow. He definitely has a lot of great NBA draft content, just NBA content in general on there. So make sure to go give him a follow. Thanks again so much for watching. If you guys did enjoy this video, there was a lot of work that went into it. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.